right, welcome to the Utility Safety Podcast. My name is Nick Leonardi. I'm the Creative and Marketing Director for Utility Business Media. And today we have with us Bill Martin, who's the President and CEO of Think Tank Project LLC. And today we're going to title this, we were chatting a little bit before this, and we're going to title this one Beyond the Checklist, a new model for workforce safety. And these are just some ideas that Bill has been kicking around in his head, and some of the things he's going to be presenting in our IP Utility Safety Conference in Dallas in October, as well as his upcoming issue, article, and Incident Prevention magazine. So welcome to the podcast, Bill. How are you doing?
Great, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking time. I know you got a lot of people calling you and emailing you, and, to take time and chat with us is always well appreciated.
Well, it's we rise to higher levels when we interact, Nick. So I always learn something from you every time we talk. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. We were just talking about AI. I learned something from you, and I'm always trying to every day, learn something new, whatever that is. So, are you excited here? You got your conference session, at the IP Utility Safety Conference coming up. Are you looking forward to speaking in front of a bunch of utility safety operation professionals?
Yeah, I was just speaking in Boston recently, and I'm wicked excited, as they would say.
I was there.
Yeah, you were there. That's right. That was, and they're wicked smart too. Yeah. So
I remember that.
So I'm always excited. This is more of a mission than a job for me. Nick, my background, having spent a lot of time in medicine and in the utility, both. I've seen a lot of bad stuff. So I'm kind of focused on how to keep it from ever happening at all, rather than focus all our attention on having it never happen again.
Yeah.
And I think if your listeners are going to this conference, what I think I'd like to tell them is that this may be one of the best conferences they will ever attend, if they listen to this podcast, because what we're going to talk about, I think, some today is, the information is very similar. It's always evolves kind of slowly, but we learn more as we go along, and the information progresses. But the thing that we really need to change is us, the people that are going to the conference. And if they go with a plan, I'm thinking someday we should do a conference talk on how to attend a conference. Because really the thing that needs to change is us. So if we attend this conference with a plan, and then implement that plan and see what happens, we can move forward. And I think I'm going to be talking about the way forward. The way forward is translating all that great information and knowledge we learn in these conferences to applying it to some action at work. And the key change of the model is, instead of just dumping it on your workforce and say, okay, this is the new stuff I learned, let's go do this. Explain to them why you think it's of any importance, then ask them to test and evaluate it for you, right? Say, look, let's try this little 3-minute thing after the job brief I learned, and I want you guys to test and evaluate this. And weekly, I want to create a feedback loop to tell me what you're learning from this. And it's okay if you don't like it or you don't value it. But just like the tools you use and the trucks you use and the FR clothing you use, you're the market tester for those. I want you to market test this idea that I have and see if you find value in it. I think that's a different model. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, listening to presentations, going through courses, learning things, if you don't apply what you learn, did you really learn anything? And how do you decipher whether that information was of value, if it worked, if it didn't, if it made a change at the end of the day, in the numbers, at the end of the year? I don't know. I do think that's an important thing, is you have to come away with, whether it's something you decide or maybe it's a few things, what are you going to do when you go to work to start to implement change in what you've learned? Because if you don't do anything, if you take it all in and maybe you write some notes and then you do nothing with it, what's really changed? You wasted some time, unfortunately. That's if you're not doing anything different, then you've wasted time, and it's not going to affect any change.
the quote, this might be my quote, I don't know, but if we want to change something at work, something at work needs to change. So my suggestion is start a checklist when you go to these places and these things. The little thing that triggers you personally. And because I love listening to David McPeak and Rod Courtney and Danny Ray. All of these, I get really good information. And across our country, there's all kinds of conferences and really good information. But if we, the attendees, could find the thing that resonates with us and get a few things in a little checklist, and then present them to the workforce to test and evaluate this idea. And after a month, hey, we didn't really like this. We don't see any value. Great, let's cross that one off. Here, try this one now, because I learned this also in this conference. Then we start to itemize the things that affect us and create some consistency in the workforce. And I'm going to tell you my experience, because I'm not just talking about this, I'm actually doing this. My experience is when the workforce finds something they value, they will implement it for you. Problem of implementation is, but now we have to do this. We have to change the job brief because we're going to add this to it, and this is what we're going to do. And we had a committee of guys that talked about it. But I think we can use the entire workforce to be the committee. In my opinion, it's just a different model, and it's when I feel really good about something and I'm thinking this is going to work. If I'm looking at it as a social experiment, I may really like the idea, but the 4 words I want to use more often for the workforce is, what do you think? Because it doesn't matter if I like it. You're at the sharp end. What matters is if you see any value in it. What do you?
Yeah.
Am I making any sense? Because sometimes I feel like people don't get it.
Yeah, no, I was thinking back to my prior experience. I worked with signs, labels, tags for the utility industry, and we would get an engineer spec that would come through that would say, hey, it's got to last 20 years outdoors, and it's got to be engineer grade reflective, and it's got to be black on yellow, and this size and all of that. And what do? We tested those, we evaluated those, right? We didn't just take the information and go with what we thought worked. We built a construction. We had a weathering chamber that would accelerate weathering conditions with moisture and sunlight and stuff like that. And we would evaluate and test those constructions to make sure that they met the spec that was being asked of. We didn't just assume that was going to work, whatever we had decided to build. And so, I think that parallels a little bit with what we're saying for safety. We don't just take what we hear, we test and evaluate it. How are we ever going to know when new ideas are better than the old ones if we're not testing and evaluating, changing, and having, going back to your original podcast I think you ever did with Kate, was actionable safety. If you don't take action, nothing's going to change. So, yeah, I think that's important. And, I know you have an article coming up, and I don't want to give too much of it away, but, I have some questions that I think could facilitate our conversation a little bit. One of which is a conversation we had with Brent Jeffries, our friend over there at Beer Meters. And, what is meant by synchronizing the team in the context of workplace safety?
Synchronizing the team, it's interesting. So we can all have different beliefs, come from different backgrounds, different genders, different political beliefs. But when we synchronize on the objective, we start interacting. So we think
the objective is safety, right?
Well, no, actually, the objective is work, and safety is actually a product of work, right? So of the environment. So like safety is a product of the environment. So you think of kids skateboarding, and you watch them, they're having a great time. Are they trying to be safe? They're actually trying to become more competent.
Right.
And in increasing their competence, they become safer. And they may wear wrist guards and helmets and elbow guards and things that to improve their odds if they fall in the skateboard.
PPE, yep.
Right. But their objective isn't I'm going to go to the skateboard park, Mom, to be safe. I'm going to go skateboarding.
Yeah.
And as I get better, I'm going to fall less. Well, but I'm going to take higher risk because I'm better at it, right? So So competency is huge. And I think we miss that sometimes. We start focusing, we laser focus, like I said, on the injury or serious injury or fatality, when really, if we zoom out a little bit, we could create a better environment that will actually allow us to interact more, to help each other when we have an alcohol dependency or a drug dependency, or we're depressed. We'll recognize those disruptions to synchrony, not just work related.
Right.
So if you look at in nature, elk, it's almost hunting season. The elk migrate in Colorado. They all get together, and I don't know, Nick, if they text and phone each other and say, hey, time to migrate, let's go. Probably not. Birds migrate, butterflies. So in nature all around us, we synchronize. And then we think when we see a storm and we see a parking lot or even an airport staged with line trucks, it looks like a big migration of line trucks.
Right.
But line trucks aren't mammals. They're inanimate. The thing we really need to synchronize are the people in the trucks.
Yeah.
Right? So if you think about an orchestra, when an orchestra is playing a really good sweet tune, it's synchronized. And then when it plays out of tune, if you get a French horn playing out of tune, it's easy to recognize that disruption. Or football games, they huddle before every play to resync before each play.
Yeah.
If we learn to get connected more in a workforce, we'll start to recognize that one or that situation that's disrupting you. I just talked to a friend who's a general foreman, and he's got a really good attitude, and he has longevity in his teamwork, in his teams. People come in and they don't like to leave because they're synced. Yeah. And he said he just had a guy that just didn't fit, and he talked with him, and now that the guy left, people that are uncomfortable in that sync will leave on their own. And if they don't, you need to help them find, they're not bad. They just have to help them find where they fit.
Yeah.
It's like a divorce. Two people get divorced doesn't mean they're bad people. They go on to live normal lives. They just didn't fit with each other. So,
yeah.
Does that make sense? I answer your question?
Yeah, no, I agree. The analogy that I take, the one that fits with my life is, I played sports growing up as a kid and most through high school. And you definitely felt when the team was synchronized. People got along. They were, understanding this was a team sport. You're helping each other score, which is helping the team score, and you're not just worried about the individual star player on the team. And you see it all the time, right, in championship teams in the Olympics, when they have the teams like the sled, the luge, and you got the teams on there. It's about the team. It's not about the individual. And that's where I kind of resonate with is that, and then, you made me think of another part of my life where, I used to work with a gentleman who, when I started, he was on break he wasn't working from, he had cancer, and he was in the process of, getting chemo and getting that resolved. And when he came back, we weren't in sync because I hadn't ever met him, and we were working on the same stuff. When we did get in sync, once we realized we were on the same team, even though we were doing the same work, we were a team, became a really good friendship in which I still talk with him today. We're still in sync. He'll call me about something and be like, "How I'm having this issue with this," and then I'll be like, "Oh, did you just like we're right back working together," and we'll roll through and so those two situations of my life really kind of show that, and it does lead to change because without that, you're worrying about a whole bunch of stuff that honestly doesn't frankly matter. What is that person thinking about me? You start to worry about stuff that just frankly doesn't matter, and you're not focused on the work or the safety or the rest of your team.
Yeah, there's a quote, I can't remember who said it, the synergy of a team is as important, if not more important, than the talent of any individual. And it's also interesting, we think intelligence is a mass of stuff inside our head.
Right.
But the latest science, well, think about technology. Back in the around 1900, we always associate the brain with whatever the latest technology is. So if you can imagine, back around 1940, the AT&T switchboard, the operator plugging buttons, and they used to talk about the brain as a switchboard where you just plug into different circuits. And then the computer, they said, well, the brain is a computer, but the brain isn't a computer or a switchboard. And a computer, when you put the money, when you ask it to do something or a certain calculation or something, it does it the same way every time. But our intelligence isn't in our head. It's a transaction. So the intelligence right now is between you and I is higher because it's collective than it would be if either of us were thinking alone. And we're not only interacting with each other, we're interacting with the space we're in, with movement, with the environment. So all of those things change the way we think. Even the way elementary kids figure out math when they had elementary kids sit on their hands and they couldn't do math because when they're working on math, they're moving their hands and fingers around and their mind goes into their hands and fingers. So our mind, one of the quotes I liked was, we all have a brain, but it takes many brains to make one mind. And when we start to do that collective synchronizing thing, we are operating at a higher cognitive level. It's called socially distributed cognition, where you have a piece I don't have, and that other person's piece. But when we put all the pieces together, we do amazing things. It's really what is about to happen with our younger generation. When they learn how to connect, look out, because they're going to do amazing things.
So a couple points, and I got a question that kind of popped up in my head from that. But, the thing I find interesting is you said technology and brain and these things were created, social media, things to synchronize us, across states, continents, right? But I'd argue they've done the opposite. That wasn't really a question, more just a statement that I had in my mind. But the question I generated was, it's great for us to sync on the job site, working together as teammates, but how can management, upper management, because sometimes they don't, sometimes they get in the way. How can they help facilitate and foster an environment to allow us to synchronize better as a team or a line crew?
So it's always simpler than we think it is, because we're humans, and 8 billion of us are exactly alike. We're designed, we think different, we have different experiences, but we're designed exactly the same. So when that thing you just said about the computers, there's already been studies that we don't engage the same with a computer screen as we do with each other as a human. It's a different, the 3-dimensional world it affects a different part of our brain, which is just interesting. But so what management does often is they bias based on their perceived expertise and agenda. So when management shows up, you try this for a classroom. You're teaching a course, and the first thing you do is tell somebody, well, we're going to work on this, is what I think about this. And now the brains of the people I'm looking at are thinking in terms of what's going on in my head. But if I start the opposite of that and say, so we're going to be working on this, what are your thoughts on that? And now we start a collective engagement on the thoughts before I bias them on my thought, right? I was in a meeting with a utility recently and a small contractor, and they wanted to ask the contractor some questions about something they were doing well. And the person from the utility this is on Zoom, or Teams, started with 9 bullet points. So now the whole meeting is going to be focused on the management's 9 bullet points. Mm-hmm. But they were there to source what the contractor was doing. See what I mean? So if you're a manager and you want to engage your team, you can tell them what you think, or you can ask them what they think. You have a choice. And if you hold off what you think, you'll get more information from them, which actually starts a whole engagement. You've done this, and I've done this, right? If I say measure twice, you're thinking cut once. If I say finger licking, You see good in a chicken.
Yep.
Things arise in our minds based on our experiences. But in order to allow that to happen, management needs to just resource the information collectively in front of them before they bias it. Does that make it's hard management to change that model, honestly, because they're in charge.
Management sometimes, from what I understand, the main critique, they just want to check the box on safety. Hey, make sure you're doing your job brief. Check. Make sure you're doing X, Y, Z. Check. And that approach is just, I'm going to quote David here, is pleasing the system. It opens us up to not potentially being as safe as we could. We need to rely on each other. We need to synchronize together, and we can help keep each other safe.
We don't have to like each other to do that, right? I mean, we don't need to like each other. We just need to be curious. So if we spend our time in defense, right? If I come to work and I say, "What the hell, Dick? Why'd you do that?" You're going to justify and rationalize whatever you did. And that's put you in defense. And the thing you're justifying and rationalizing is something you did in the past. We can't change the past at all. Our only move is forward, right? So forward is logic, reason, and intuition. But if I push you into defense, justification and rationalization, it's really hard to move forward. And there's lots of models around like that. Our government does some of it. Yeah, I really, let's talk about the conference for a minute. If and checking the box. So you guys plan a great conference. Check. You schedule for a date. Check. You get a whole bunch of really speakers on different and a varied bunch of topics. Check. You get 350 people that have signed up for your conference. Check. They're arriving to the conference and they meet together in our keynote and we're all in the room together. Check. We go around from room to room and listen to all the conferences. Check. And then when we get home, we start applying what we learned in a specific organized manner. I don't think so. Uncheck. And just like the chain of survival for CPR, if we miss one link in that chain, the outcome isn't as good. So I think what happens is we get so caught up in checking the box. I'll give you another. A utility might have a safety day and schedule a safety day. Check. They schedule a safety meeting in the morning to talk about something specific, PPE or whatever. Check. They bring in a speaker. Check. They have a nice lunch. Check. They do a motivating close. Check. They've had a great safety day. And then they have chosen some small thing from that safety day to work on as a company to test and evaluate with their workers to see if it's of any value. I don't think so. I think we missed that. I can even go a step further. We do this the best intentions, unwittingly and unwillingly. We do this. I've been researching something just recently. Almost everybody in this industry takes CPR. And I just talked to a couple linemen, one with 50 years. I talked to a guy who's 49 with 20-some years. And I asked a bunch of these guys the same question. I said, "So you guys are taking a lot of CPR?" They, "Yeah." And you've got a mannequin in front of you when you're redoing your CPR, and you put your fingers on their guy's rubber neck, and they say no pulse, and you start CPR. Right. You get checked off. Right. So I got a couple of questions for you. He said, "Yeah." I said, "When's the last time you checked for a pulse on the neck of one of your coworkers?" You know what they said? Never. One guy for 50 years, never. But in that worst moment with a dead or seriously injured worker, we think we are ready to take a pulse because we checked a pulse on a plastic mannequin. Yet, if you want to become a good worker or good at carving, you need to practice, right?
Yeah.
So if we start actually feeling for the pulse on our workers, there's some subconscious benefit to that. We realize they're human, whether we like them or not, right? So, and then it gets worse. I said, "And what if you find a pulse? What does that mean?" Like, well, I don't know. Nobody's ever talked to me about that because that whole idea, we don't prepare for things we don't think will happen. So we don't really need to know that because it's never going to happen. Yeah. Well, there's out of hospital cardiac arrest in our country of 1,000 a day, 70% in the home. Practicing, and everybody has a different size neck. Finding a carotid pulse isn't always easy. And when you can't find, when you're almost in disbelief, because I've done this a number of times, and if you don't have a pulse, you start CPR, but the pulse also tells you something, and it's not rocket science. We're color coded. If you're gray and pale and you have a really rapid, weak pulse, it just expedited your condition. If I'm in a right of way, I got to get you somehow to meet the ambulance at the road. But that means I need to know how to pick you up and package you in the back of my pickup truck to get you there. But because we haven't gone to that next step of actually checking a pulse, none of the other steps ever have.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if maybe I got off topic on your question a little bit. But
no, I mean, I think the main focus is really just to make sure that we are not just talking about safety, or taking notes about safety or taking a course about safety. We're actionable in what we're doing. We're practicing for change. If we don't do that stuff, how are we, just like you said with the pulse thing, how are we going to be ready when we actually need to do it? That's a great example, by the way. Process, on a plastic dummy or silicone dummy, and at the end of the day, like when it happens, are you ready? Are you ready to? Do you know what that pulse feels like on your fingers? That's a great way to put it. And
well,
I think we need to act more.
What we've done, Nick, is not nobody's fault. It's like I tell people, you guys, most people I talk to speak English, and I tell them it's not their fault. They were born in English, right? I mean, one of 7,139 languages. So it's not our fault that we think practicing for the skill is all we need, but we actually need to practice for the event. It's the same thing. We think going to a conference and listening to these great speakers is all we need, but we need to translate that into some type of physical change. So I often talk about physical reality, right? An injury doesn't care what gender you are, what political belief you are, what religion you are. It hurts the same.
Yep.
So that's physical reality. And we all suffer this in the same physical reality. That means the work itself is in physical reality. We're creating things that didn't exist, like a new power line or a new substation or a new underground, in physical reality. That means the solution to the safety problems we have to be translated into physical reality for these workers, which means we have to try something different on Monday from what we learned. It can't just be information. The knowledge we just learned is not power, right? The application of that knowledge is power. And if the knowledge is in Russian and the reality of work is in English, there will be no translation.
Yeah.
So we need to translate what we learned into the same language of the workers. And often we see a lot of the new things that are being implemented in a language that satisfies management and the CEO of companies, not fished out through the worker to see, what do you think? What words should we use for this? And words matter. I mean, if I tell someone they're stupid, it releases a different neurochemical than if I tell them they're brilliant. So if I tell somebody, like the capacity model, I love and I understand it, but I don't hear a lot of workers talk about the capacity. We're trying to get that to be part of our new language, but there's some resistance because it's not the way that the workers talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if we use the language of the worker, and better yet, we get them to test and evaluate it, they'll come back with what they think. Oh yeah, we like this. We don't call it this. We call it this.
So,
you know what I'm saying?
100%. So would you say, traditional safety programs, I don't want to say fail, but they're not improving the numbers year to year, right? We're at a stagnant point, like you've said before. Do you think that has a lot to do with we've kind of come out with these models, tools, there's the things that we say, but we're not taking it to action on work? I mean, some of us are. I don't want to take any credibility from the folks that are, but there are a majority that, they're not going back and making changes and then evaluating those changes. Because again, just because you made the changes doesn't mean that it's going to have a positive effect. You need to evaluate and see, is this the right thing to be doing going forward?
So, and we've created, but no fault. I'm not blaming anybody. The best intentions. Nobody wants to see anybody get hurt, right?
Right.
But even evaluating, we want to be able to measure and manage what we're doing. But Nick, if you and I are working together and we're connected and synced, and I'm about to do something, hey, dude, you say, listen, I think you should do it this way because I've had a bad outcome doing it that way. And I say, all right, Nick, thanks. I'm gonna try what you said, and I'm gonna do that because I know you have a lot of experience, and I may not think that's the right way, but I'm gonna try it and let you know what I find out. And then nothing happens. I don't get hurt. We can't measure or manage what doesn't happen, right?
Right.
So we seem to have this sense that it has to happen for us to manage it. Well, what if the 9/11 never happened? If we never went to war with Iraq and we never created Homeland Security, some of that stuff that happened was really good that we learned from it, but it didn't change the potential for being killed by a foreign terrorist, because that's the same before and after 9/11. So preventing the thing from never happening again is different than doing things to make it never happen at all. And I don't blame anything. I think we're on there's so much great information out there. Really, people are working really hard to come up with new ideas and new stuff. I think the missing link is the translation.
Yeah.
We need to involve the workforce. If you and I are working and we aren't connected, and you got an attitude today, and I'm not participating today, I'm having a bad day, and that information doesn't flow from me to you that I just learned. It creates there's a break in continuity between us. We need to create continuity. Imagine a football team playing where the quarterback doesn't really understand what the play is about because he's disconnected. It doesn't go well. It's not really rocket science. This idea of synergy and synchrony, I think, is uncharted territory. And then, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it's important that, if you have that type of relationship, you're synced, you're going to share like, oh, well, my significant other, we had a fight and I'm not in the mood to discuss stuff right now. And you understand each other better, which foster, and you start to humanize your coworker. I think also is another, benefit to that is just, hey, this is a real person too. When you get in sync and you're like, like you said, I may not hang out with this person outside of, stringing conductive line or poles, but they're a human and I care about that they get home safe, and we get this work done.
Let me give your listeners something to do, because safety isn't about something to think about. It's about something to do. So
that's kind of what we're talking about, right? So
let's do it. So let's say there's these new companies now. There's a bunch of different ones. I won't name any of them. They're storm companies, and they bring all the qualified help in to go work on storms. And we're having lots of storms, you might recognize, right?
Yep.
These guys don't know each other. They come from different places, and they stick them together in trucks, and then they all march down and they work. What if, while they're sitting in the parking lot waiting for the work, because every storm you go to, there's some chaos, and they spend sometimes hours in parking lots. What if we got them out of the truck and we stood them in a circle and say, hey, let's just get to know each other a little bit, and let's go around and I want you to tell me your name and 2 truths and a lie. 3 things about you, 2 of them true, 1 that's not. Let's see if we can figure out the one that's not. And we did that the first day whenever we had a break, until everybody got to do it. At the end of that, you would know that this guy's a father of 8 and a musician. This is a mother, and she's actually a medical professional before she went into the utility. Or you'll get some depth about these people. And Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, 2011, him and Amos Tversky, said, we can't not know stuff subconsciously. Like, don't think of a white bear. Right? It's impossible for your listeners now not to think of a white bear. We can't not know that this guy's a father of 8, that this woman was a medical professional. Something goes wrong, I'm going to look for her. Where is she? Right? Or if you've got a father of 8, I'm going to say, dude, you're about to do that. Are your kids okay with that? Different things are going to arise from our subconscious. So here's my thought for your audience. This is just one idea. Another one, is when you're introducing a group, introduce them again, but ask them their first name and something they are, not just what they do. And they will pause and they'll have difficulty with that because nobody's ever done it. But if you practice, you'll start learning a deeper level, and that causes synchrony because now you know each other at a slightly different level.
Bit, right? Humanizing. That's
well, I got it from you. You said humanizing, and that's what popped in my head. So thank you very much. That's what that just did. That
synchronized.
Finger licking. I saw the chicken. Right. So, so I mean, your listeners, it's free. The hardest part for them to do is actually take the next step and be vulnerable and courageous enough to try something they haven't done, because the future is forward. We need to be a social scientist, to do social experiments, try things, see what works. And maybe you'll find a different game that will be different or a combination of the two. I don't know, right? But if we don't try anything, nothing changes.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. If we don't make actionable changes on the information, whether it's in your personal life, your work life, I mean, it goes back to even think about this: when you go out for a certification or you go out for a test in high school, you do practice exams, right? And you get that feedback, and you're like, "Oh, I didn't do so good. I thought I was a B plus, and I got a D minus." You take that feedback again, you could do nothing, right? And you're probably going to get the same or a worse result, maybe a slightly better if you had a bad day. But if you take that and take action and you say, look, I'm not where I need to be, and you go and you put in the work and the effort, you're going to improve that score. Taking action matters, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So my talk in Dallas is titled "The Way Forward." We've gotten to where we are, and now we need to move forward. And forward requires an interaction that creates an environment that allows us to move forward, right? And so I'm going to be doing some things, a little bit of, I like doing stuff with the brain, illusions here and there, but we don't all see the same thing because intelligence isn't in our heads. It's a transaction between us. And when somebody is isolated from this transaction, or if a manager comes in and creates a disturbance and now has released the wrong chemicals and we're all stressed, when the event happens, it won't go back to the manager who just yelled at us. It'll be somebody made an error.
Yeah.
But the error was made because of that transaction that lowered the cognitive level of the entire group.
Mm-hmm.
And if your listeners have all been party to that. The guy where you're afraid to speak up because you got to walk on eggshells because he'll go off on you. We need to help those people learn how to integrate. But I don't know. It's a big call, but I think we're capable. I think we can do it. I appreciate this chance to move us. Thanks.
Well, thanks for being a part. I mean, the first step. I mean, it may not change tomorrow, but you got to take a step today if you'd like to see it change tomorrow or in a week. I was kind of something fun. I know you and I are both kind of AI addicts, trying to utilize AI to make our lives better and give us more insights. And I was throwing some of the things we were talking about in this podcast into ChatGPT, and I wanted it to summarize in a single quote what we've discussed. And it gave me something pretty interesting back. So it says, safety isn't achieved by checking boxes. It's built by engaging the workforce, applying knowledge, and evolving with real-time feedback.
Wow.
Which I think is kind of everything we've been saying.
Yeah. So I'll leave you, maybe this is the thought that you just popped in my head. In physical reality is different than we often imagine it. And we don't realize that when we're focused on a goal, every step we take, something changes, right? So the reality is that you take that next step towards the goal, and now everything's a little bit different because you took that step. You have a different view. Different things have happened. And what I like to say is we need to reevaluate at every step, not just after when we get close to the goal, because at every step, we change and the world changes around us.
Mm-hmm.
because we change the world.
Absolutely. And I think when you're focused on a goal, a singular goal, and a lot of people are goal driven, you become tunnel vision a little bit, right? And, you don't see the world around you. You don't see your coworker around you, or coworkers. Obviously we need to start syncing back to the earlier part of our conversation as a team. And that includes management too, by the way. It's not just people in the field, right? You can sync with people in the field, but you also need to learn to extend the olive branch, start those conversations with upper management. You may not like them because they're the other group, as a lot of people will say. We're out in the field, they're in the office, but I think that's important too, is to synchronize the company.
So another thing you could do for management is these silos, the other group you're talking about. We need to learn together in order to sync. So it doesn't hurt for management to sit in on apprentice training or to go into the workforce when they're doing a job brief. Management needs to, if we need to learn together. When we learn separate, management learns this thing, and then the union learns this thing, or the workforce learns this thing. They're not learning together. But when they're learning together, they interact, they sync differently. Yeah. And I think that's a cue for management. If we want to cut the silo, then we need to step across it. And often it's not so easy for a worker to step into your world if you're in management.
100%.
Much easier for the management to step into their world.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that. If you like what we're talking about, Bill Martin has a session that's going to focus on a lot of this stuff. It's called The Way Forward. To change something at work needs to change. And I think that will be the Bill Martin quote. But, if you're interested, Dallas, Texas, we're going to be in October 22nd through the 24th. Bill's session's on Thursday at 7:30 a.m. I encourage you to attend and reach out to him and talk with him. Bill's always open to sharing his contact info, and he wants to understand, how has this worked for you? Evaluate it. He wants feedback. And Bill, I really appreciate you spending the time today and talking about some of this stuff. And it's not, I know sometimes it can be challenging. It's a little different type of safety conversation, but I think it's valuable, and I think our listeners will find it valuable. So thanks again. Do you have any closing statements or thoughts, before I see you here in Dallas?
I think your audience needs to know that your talent, we came into this without a script, right? So this was totally organic, and that requires a lot of vulnerability and courageousness to try to move forward without a script, but with just a general idea and see where it goes. And to Nick, kudos to you, because you drove this, and it wouldn't exist without your idea. And often I would encourage your listeners to do this. Next time somebody has a good idea, tell them this. Say, well, that's a good idea. You know why? Because you thought of it and you have a lot of experience. And I think when we start recognizing each other, that just because it didn't enter my head, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. Because it entered your head, we should try it, because I don't care if they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because it entered their head, we should honor it and try it, and then be, as a social experiment and a scientist, learn from whatever that is, good or bad. If there's high consequence, of course, we need to be careful what we do.
Right.
But in most cases, there's a lot of ways to do the same thing.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And, there's a lot of things that we do. I mean, coworkers I work with, I feel like I take a lot of time and try to be thoughtful in what we do. And we're a small company. We try to, we can't do everything. So we try to really focus our time on the right ideas. But I do that a lot, where lately someone else has got another idea. I try to step back and say, let's try that. Let's see how that works, right? And it may work phenomenal, and it may not. But if you don't try, you'll never know. And you're not the only person in the room. So I highly, highly recommend doing that. I'm excited to see your session in Dallas. I saw your session at IOTA, which was was a great conference. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you. And maybe we can, it seems like we have a tradition of you, Kate, and I doing a podcast at these conferences live there. So maybe we'll do something there for folks.
Well, that'd be fun. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we should do one and let people come in and get in the conversation.
Hey, I'd be open to that. I think that would be fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, Nick, I appreciate this in you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Excited. Thanks for being a part of this, Bill.
Howdy, partners. The IP Utility Safety Conference is hightailing into Dallas, Texas this October 22nd through the 24th. Register today at utilitysafetyconference.com.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company management prior to implementation.